Hi guys, this lesson is on adding and subtracting decimals. It comes from the standard 6.NS.2.3, and you can see the part of the standard that we're going to be working on is on fluently, that we need to be able to fluently add, subtract multi-digit decimals using the standard algorithm for each operation. And in case you're wondering, an algorithm is a procedure for solving a problem. It's like a how-to. So the two things you're going to need is your composition notebook and a sharpened pencil, please. I want you to go ahead and open up to the next available 2 pages in your composition notebook. On the left-hand side is where we're going to write our step-by-step notes, and on the right side is where we're going to be doing our practice problems. Now, don't write this down yet because I want you to kind of get a visual of what's going to go on the left side of our notes and what's going to go on the right side of your notes. So when we start, we're going to be starting on this side right here on the left. All right, so let's begin. Go ahead and title the top of your paper, How to Add and Subtract Decimals. Now remember, throughout this video, anytime that you have to write something down, you're probably going to need to pause the video in order to have time to get it written down before I keep talking again, that is. Okay, so be sure to go ahead and pause. So we're going to go ahead and start with step 1. Step 1, we need to make sure that we line up the decimals. Step 2, we want to make sure that we're going to add or subtract. Step 3, we're going to slide the decimal point down in the answer line. Okay, so far this is what your notes should look like. So now we're going to be working on the right side of our page, which is going to be this side right over here. And we're going to go ahead and start working through some examples. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the sum of 7 2/10 plus 9 5/10. So I want you to go ahead and write this down. Now we can't add when our numbers are horizontal like this. We have to write our numbers vertically, which means one number above the other. So we're going to go ahead and rewrite it like I did here. What I want you to pay attention to is how I lined up my decimal points. If you notice where the decimals are, and I'm going to draw a line that goes right through them, you can see that my decimals are completely lined up. So now from here, we're just going to go ahead and add these guys up like normal. 2 plus 5 gives you a 7. 7 plus 9 gives us 16. And then remember, the third step was for you to slide your decimal points down. So you see that our decimals are over here in this row, so I'm just going to slide it down into my answer column. And so therefore, the sum is 16 7/10. And really, that's it. Let's try our next example. Now remember, you're copying all this down. So go ahead and write 3 9600 plus 2 1/10 down the way that you see it. Just as before, we cannot add with our numbers horizontally like this, so we need to recopy them so that they are vertical, one number above the other. So go ahead and give this a try, but remember, line up your decimal points. Pause your video if you need to. So what you should have done is written your problem to look like this. Now you'll notice here we have not really a problem, but you will notice that we do have a gap. So it's an easy fix. When you have this gap here, what we like to do is put a 0 here to kind of hold the place. And you can see I did this in a different color, so you can see that I wasn't part of the original problem, but that I added it in there so my number or my problem doesn't look lopsided. Now, it doesn't change the value of the problem because 2 1/10 has the same exact value as 2 10/100. It's sort of like saying a dime and 10 pennies. Even a dime doesn't look the same as 10 pennies does, but they have the same value of both being 10 cents. And that's kind of what we just did here. So now let's go ahead and add. So we're going to add our 6 plus 0, which gives us 6. 9 plus 1 gives us 10, so I'm putting my 0 here and carrying my 1. I'm going to add my 3 plus 2, which is 5, plus 1 more gives me 6. And now I'm going to drop my decimal point down. Notice this is where my decimals are. Okay, so I'm just going to slide my decimal straight down into my answer line. So my answer is 6 and 600ths. Now it's important that you remember to slide that decimal down, because 6 and 600ths is not the same thing as 606. Imagine if this was money that you had to pay somebody, and if you had to pay somebody $6.06 is much better than having to pay somebody $606. So that's why those decimal points are super duper important that you use them properly. All right, let's try another example. So on this one here, we have 1 and 3700ths plus 4. Go ahead and copy that down. Let me talk to you about this number 4 right over here. That 4 is a whole number. Now, you don't see a decimal anywhere in that number, but all numbers have decimals. If they don't have something that comes after it, it's just not necessary to write it down. So this 4 technically does have a decimal, and its decimal is located right after it, and I'm putting it with a green dot, and that's really where you would find that decimal point. So you do want to still write this number vertically, one number above the other, and you can see how I did this. Okay, and I added the decimal point after the 4 in my problem that I rewrote one number above the other. So you'll notice that I've got two numbers here, two spaces that don't have a number, which would be right over here where I'm putting my first 0 and now my second 0. And now I'm just going to go through and go ahead and add these guys together. 7 plus 0 gives me 7. 3 plus 0 gives me 3. 1 plus 4 gives me 5. And don't forget to slide that decimal straight down. So you'll basically notice that when you're adding, and the same thing for when you are subtracting, you're just adding and subtracting like normal, and then you just simply slide that decimal down, but only after you've lined them up. All right, so let's go ahead and try a couple of subtraction problems. So here, go ahead and find the difference. This is the first problem that you have, 8 and 9/10 minus 2 and 4/10. Now remember, we can't leave it like this, so we're going to have to write it vertically, one number above the other. So you can see that I did this here. Go ahead and pause the video and give this one a try. Now remember, on this one, you are subtracting. So here's what you should have written down or done. 9 minus 4 gives me a 5. 8 minus 2 gives me a 6. I'm going to slide my decimal down. My answer is 6 and 5/10. Not too bad. Let's try our next problem. 97 minus 16 and 9800ths. Now you guys keep in mind that 97, you don't see a decimal in it, which means that its decimal comes at the end of the number, right after that 7, which is right over there. So go ahead and write this number vertically. Go ahead and pause your video and subtract this guy out. Give it a try. You are going to have to regroup and go all the way to the 7 to borrow. So on this problem, or in this problem, I'm going to go ahead and add my decimal point after the 97 and 2 zeros. You must do this one here. Now, keep in mind, you cannot do 0 minus 8. So this 0 has to go next door to over here to borrow, but he's got nothing, which means I've got to go all the way over here to the 7. So basically, it's the neighbor 2 houses down. So we're going to borrow 1 from the 7. So that 7 is going to now get crossed out. It becomes a 6. So now the first 0, this guy right here, now becomes a 10. But see, really who needed the number first was the 0 right over here at the end of the number. So now the 10, this guy right here, becomes a 9. And now this guy becomes a 10. And now we can actually subtract. So we're going to be looking at these two numbers first. 10 minus 8 gives us a 2. Oops. 9 minus 9, and I'm getting that from this guy right over here, 9 minus 9, gives us 0. Then I've got 6 minus 6, these two guys right over here, gives us a 0 again. And then a 9 minus 1 gives us an 8, and slide down your decimal point. Notice how all my decimals are lined up on this problem. So your answer is 80 and 200ths. So this will be our last problem for this lesson. 52 1/10 minus 31 47/100. Go ahead and pause your video, rewrite this problem vertically, one number above the other, and work it all the way out, and then hit the play button and see how you did. Right, and there you have it. So after I regrouped and borrowed from everybody that I needed to borrow from, I ended up getting 20 and 63/100. All right, you guys, that's it for now, and we will see you back in class a little bit later. Good night.